Justin on the button with top pair and the nut flush draw. As Barry barrels.
No clubs, Mikey?
No.
Easy release for Mikey.
Two kings to not connect there.
Somebody has.
I'm not gonna lie, I had 2 diamonds in my hand. Another
Does Trevor want to overcall with middle pair and backdoor hearts? No, he wants to check raise instead.
Okay, now we know who has the clubs. I gotta get them off.
3x to 3,300. Barry doing a bit of posturing here. Can't imagine he's going to continue with these 2 sevens.
Has no patience, look at his face and in his eyes. He's been waiting, he's been way bound to the die. Always taking chances, all those conversations. Don't know if I'll make it, don't know why he even tries. Say, oh, I am a believer. Oh, don't know where I'll be if I'm not free to take a lead. Oh, I am a believer. Oh, ground beneath my feet, but I don't flee cause I believe. I'll stay down to the...
Hey guys, welcome back to Raising the Nuts. This is the 4th episode in the series on my trip out to Vegas to play on Poker After Dark, playing 25-50 no limit. We're going to pick up right where we left off in the last video. If you haven't seen the ones before this, check them out on the playlist up here. And let's go. Let's get into it.
Is that what he's doing?
One always stays, and then
Can I act first?
yeah.
Prior to the break, the boys discussed
and then you act.
throwing 200 ahead out there
And we'll do it
for a
next
bomb
break,
pot.
no matter where the button.
When we finished the last video, we were going on the first break and I was about even. We decided on the first hand back from the break we'd do a bomb pot, put in $200 from each player. If you don't know what a bomb pot is, everyone puts in a predetermined amount and you go right to the flop. So everyone sees the flop.
Yes.
And here it is. King 8-7 with a couple of hearts.
For everyone.
So I have 9-10 offsuit in this hand. And obviously in a 7-way pot, you're going to want to check a lot of hands. And I think this is no different. So I go ahead and check. Barry goes ahead and bets $800 with his nut flush draw. Mike makes the call with his top pair. I think those are all standard. Obviously, it can be difficult to put people on ranges and bomb pots since they have anything pre-flop. But when there's 7 people to the flop, people have to play a little bit tighter. And so you'd expect them to have a little bit of stronger ranges in these spots. So I go ahead and just call and look for a very good turn card. And that's a very good turn card. That's probably the best one you can pick off the deck. I'm obviously going to go ahead and check and let Barry continue betting, which I do. Barry decides to go for a $2,600 bet. Once he bets that, I feel pretty confident that he's going to continue with his hand, and I would be jamming over his bet regardless. Mike thinks about it for a while and makes the call. He's in a pretty tough spot here with top pair and a gut shot. I mean, Barry did bet into 6 people and has now fired again on the turn into 2 people on this card, so I think letting go of his hand makes the most sense. He ends up deciding on a call, though, and when it gets back to me, nothing to do other than just jam it all in there and hope that we get some calls. I mean, this is the ideal situation, obviously, that you wait for. You have the nuts here in a 3-way pot on the turn, and I go ahead and just jam it all in there.
Calling?
Mike makes the call in there for a savage.
How much?
Will rip.
5, 7, 8, 81, 75. 81.
So it doesn't take long for the chips to fly here on the backside of the break.
26. What is that? 55.
Over 1,700 in the middle as Barry does the math.
Second black.
Straight.
And
Be lower.
yeah, a bunch of green or just not that much. Just fine.
Okay. One sound. Like 200 over?
She works.
There you go.
34, 26. I'm bringing the fucking F minus game today. Is it on me yet?
No.
Let me know when it is.
No, I need a minute, Mikey.
Did you have a couple sips of wine on break, Mike, or was I dreaming?
No, you were dreaming. But I might start taking one after this 2,600 I just put
Maybe it
in.
was Coke.
If I were Trevor Savage, I might have an issue with the fact that Mike is heavily telegraphing what he's going to be doing.
Several people actually mentioned this to me afterwards about this hand, about Mike telegraphing his action. And I didn't even really think about it in the moment, obviously, because I had the nuts. But if I had a non-nut hand here, I'd be pretty upset about Mike doing this. But the way these games play is so much different than normal games. In a normal game, if that were to happen, it would feel really bad. On a TV game, it just feels different. I don't know how to explain it. Barry does decide on a call. He says he wants to run it twice, so we're going to head and do that. Now it's time to hold in this big pot.
It's a draw.
I need the flush.
Yeah.
You haven't been those right.
So the boys agree to run it twice in this $22,000 pot.
Second all in without me involved.
There you go.
There we go.
And a heart alone.
It's not me. I'm out to 3,200 more.
With one heart busy in Savage's hand. First river
No problem.
goes to Barry.
Not a good one.
If you're wondering what I'm drinking here, it's Snowing in Space Nitro Cold Brew Coffee. They did not pay me to say this, but it's really good and you should go buy some. I'm drinking the half caffeinated Afternoon Delight, just hoping that I get half the pot back.
Was that beautiful?
I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't mind chopping up Mikey's money here.
Yeah, I don't mind it.
All right, that's fine.
What you will do. How you roll
Getting
the
ace would do there.
Second river gives Woods an ace, but not enough against the nuts.
Bomb pot.
You like those bomb pots, Mike?
Brandon always
Everything
says
about
it's a
that hand
bomb
was
pot,
100%.
the nuts.
I then went through another 45-minute stretch where I was pretty card dead and just had no spots, and I had Barry on my direct left who was in for a ton and trying to get back to even. Pick up ace-king finally here and make it $200, and Barry calls next to act. We take the flop heads up. The flop comes queen jack 5 with 2 diamonds, and with 2 overcards, a backdoor flush draw, and a gut shot. I think I should just be betting this flop the vast majority of the time. I end up deciding to check, and Barry bets $200. Once he bets $200, I think I have an easy check call, but like I said, I think I should just be betting this flop against his really wide range. He's going to have a lot of crappy hands that are going to have a hard time continuing. This turn card, blank turn card, obviously just going to keep checking now that I checked, and he checks back very quickly. And then the river pair is the bottom card. I think I just check again and hope to win at showdown. And if he bets, I think I have a pretty decent candidate to catch a bluff that maybe just has a hand that just stabbed a flop. He bets $200 though, which is not great, but I'm getting such a great price that I think I just kind of have to call. I only have to be right like 18% of the time. I don't even know if I am. I do decide to make the call and he wins the pot. Interesting to note that if I played it the right way, which I think is to bet flop and then bet big on turn and then check to side river, I might end up losing a huge pot. In the next hand, Jeff opens in the hijack to 175. Justin calls next to act, and it gets to me in the big blind with pocket nines. Jeff had been the tightest player at the table by far, so I think calling here makes a lot of sense. I don't want to 3-bet and then just get it heads up with his tighter range. So I decide to call and take a flop. Great flop for my hand, flopping a set on an ace-high board. This board should hit Jeff quite a bit, and not surprised that he c-bets. He c-bet a very, very high frequency. When he bets $350, I think I just want to call with my hand. I don't really want to have a check-raising range on this board at all against what is a very tight range of his. So I go ahead and make the call and take the turn. Interesting card on the turn. Again, I'd expect him to have a strong range here, so this should improve his hand quite a bit to trips or possibly a full house. I wouldn't expect him to bluff this card very often, as he had given up on turns a lot in this session. He had checked back almost all turns. So when he bets $800 here on the turn, I expect him to have a pretty good hand. I don't really want to check raise this spot. I want him to continue betting trips here. And obviously I can be behind ace king occasionally. But I think I just want to keep calling and then keeping his bluffs in if there are any. I didn't expect him to have many bluffs though. Just going to continue checking on this river. And obviously showdown here. And he made a pair on the river. I don't know if he would have fired. I doubt he would have fired if he didn't make a pair. But I don't think I could have played the hand any differently. And I was pretty fortunate to get that much money out of the hand that he actually had.
Hasn't played a hand.
Platt shut it down on the river after hitting the
Full
4.
house is just a full house.
Shortly after the last hand, we all agreed to bump the game up to 50-100. So we're playing a little bit bigger now. And I again went through another stretch where I just couldn't get anything going in for over an hour. There's only like probably 20 or 25 hands. And so it's important not to force things. And, it just feels so easy, especially when you're playing on TV, to try to force it. But I just kept playing my normal game. It can be hard to get in there when everyone's really trying to play huge pots constantly, which is what was happening in this game. Here we have an open with Barry under the gun to $300. 2 calls, it gets me in the big blind, and I call with 9-7 of clubs. All that seems standard. I have about 14 or 15K in front of me. Flop a flush draw here on the king high board, and when it checks to Barry, he bets $1,000 into 1,300. Brandon Schaefer folds and Brandon Cantu calls. Barry's range is going to be pretty strong, I think, here, betting into 3 players for the most part. In a later hand, he would prove to me that this actually doesn't have to be the case. When Brandon calls, you can have straight draws, you can have pairs, you can have flush draws. And then when it gets to me, I think I just have to call. Occasionally can put in a check raise here, but I don't like doing it here with the 9 high flush draw against 2 players. So I go ahead and just call, and we can see what happens on the turn. Fortunately for me, a club does not roll off. Brandon and I both check, as I think we should with all of our hands. Barry ends up making a slight overbet of 4,500. Looks like a good sizing. I think that he should choose with specifically his hand, but with all hands on this board texture. It's a really wet board texture, and he's going to be betting mostly strong hands at this point when he bets into 2 people. Brandon ends up jamming it all in there, which I think is okay. He has a pair and a flush draw. He's going to be ahead of Barry's hand sometimes. There's a lot of draws possible as well, so I don't mind him getting in there for 6,800. I obviously have an easy fold with my hand. If you're wondering about the results of the hand, Barry obviously calls, and they end up running it twice and chopping.
More hesitant, which I expected her to be, but like
Pair in the flush draw
never
for
much
Cantu.
mind.
2 times?
He shoots it in there.
Took us into the final break of the night where I was stuck about $1,100. Come out from the break, open here to $300 with 4 or 5 of hearts in the hijack. Probably a little bit too loose given the game conditions at the time, but I'm trying to get in there and mix it up for the last hour or two. Barry puts in a 3-bet to 1,000 with queen 10 of diamonds. Gets back to me once I open to 300. Not going to fold for 700 more to Barry, even though I'm sure that's not Doug Polk approved. We got to take a flop here. All things considered, pretty ideal flop for me. Flopping middle pair, backdoor flush draw, backdoor straight draw. He bets $1,400. Consider raising here. I don't think I want to have much of a raising range on this board texture with my stack depth. I think if I was shorter or deeper, raising would make a lot more sense. It's a disaster if I get jammed on, so I think just calling makes sense. I go ahead and just make the call. Barry can have a lot of hands here, including overpairs, some 8x hands, and then overcards that miss the flop completely. Turn card is interesting. Turn the flush draw and straight draw, but it's an ace, which should hit his 3-betting range some of the time. I check, and he checks back really quickly, which actually makes me think that he has a showdown hand. I would expect him to continue bluffing with his air hand, and then check back with some hands like pocket 9s and pocket 10s that might be afraid of the ace. So when he checks, I'm not feeling too great about the situation. If he had bet, I don't know what I was going to do. Depending on the sizing, I might jam, I might call, wasn't sure. River's an offsuit 9. I consider bluffing here, but I don't think it's going to be very effective. So I decided to check and just try to show down. If he bets, I would actually consider going for the check jam all in. He ends up checking back pretty quickly, letting me off the hook. I think he just felt bad for me and the kids and wanted me to finally win a pot. This ended up being the biggest pot that I'd win over the last 3.5 hours of the show, unfortunately.
Taking any of my family there.
How many more you
just
king,
for
queen,
vulgarity.
Sure.
Next hand is another small pot where intuition in-game told me I should do something different, and I didn't. Opened to $300 under the gun with ace deuce of spades, and Jeff puts in a 3-bet to $950 on the button. Now, Jeff, like I had mentioned earlier, had been the tightest player at the table. When he put this 3-bet in, I actually did think he was a little light, and I considered a 4-bet. And my actual hand is a really good candidate for a 4-bet, having the ace blocker and being suited, but I ended up deciding just to call, given his tighter image. Unfortunately, I flop a big old nothing burger here on the king, king, queen, 2-club flop, and he decides to down bet. Like I mentioned before, he c-bet with a really high frequency, so I really wanted to do something in this spot, having the ace blocker here to ace king and ace queen. And I think if I had just one spade on the flop, I would probably put in a check raise or at least call, but I think on this board, I just have to fold, unfortunately.
Cirque show on parking.
This was another small kind of annoying pot. I actually misclicked here and made it $200 on the button. Meant to open to $300. We're playing 50-100, so I only min raised. And Barry calls from the small blind with jack deuce off, and that brings Mike in from the big blind with queen 3 offsuit. So I think if I just make the normal open, we probably just win the pot pre-flop. Queen 7-6, 2 clubs is a pretty decent flop for me. I'd prefer to have a club in my hand, but I do have a gut shot and 2 overs to middle pair, so I go ahead and bet $400 into 700, and Barry makes a pretty quick fold, but Mike calls. When he calls, I think he can have any pair on the board. He can have some flush draws, can have some straight draws, maybe some ace high floats. Turns the jack of clubs, completing the flush, and Mike decides to lead out for $1,000, and I honestly did not believe him very much here. I thought it was more likely that he just had a pair with a club. Unfortunately, my hand doesn't play really great in this scenario, and I have a bunch of other hands to continue with that include a single club or flushes or pairs or all those other hands. So I end up just deciding to give up and fold. I wish that I had a different hand in that spot that I could do something with, but I think folding 8-10 just makes sense. I pick up a real hand here with pocket tens under the gun, make it $300. Get a call from Mike in the cutoff, and then Brandon calls in the big blind. Flop comes ace 8-9 with 2 diamonds, which is not ideal for my pocket tens, obviously. Brandon checks. I decide to check over Mike and see what happens, and he quickly puts out a bet of $725. Brandon folds. I decided to fold based on his sizing and timing. I kind of felt like he just had an ace here and had it a lot. Additionally, I have 2 tens, which blocks a lot of the straight draws. Mike could occasionally be betting a 9 here, but given the way that he played previously, I think he'd go with the smaller sizing.
Probably a bad fold.
I got blackjack.
Wow. Trevor just releases.
2 tens.
Gets validated right away.
I had a couple of small spots in between this one where I flatted 3 bets with speculative hands that didn't get there, so at this point was stuck probably 3 or 4K. Barry opens under the gun to 300, and just part of this hand, this is really important information, we had decided that we would show 1 card after each hand. And Barry was really on board with getting this done. So that was something I should have thought about a little bit more going into this hand. Barry opens to 300. Mike calls with king, queen of diamonds. Justin calls ace 6 of clubs, and I call in the big blind with 8, 9 of hearts. All that seems pretty standard. Let's take a flop. Interesting flop as it comes ace 8, 2 with 2 clubs. I check. Barry bets $1,100. Justin makes a pretty quick call, and then it's on me. I can easily just call here, having middle pair, backdoor flush draw. I like putting in a raise, though, as I had a really good table image. I have a really relevant blocker to my opponent's strongest hands. I didn't think Barry had a particularly strong hand, and Justin called pretty quickly, so he can have some worse hands as well. And I thought I would get a lot of credit from him. The stack sizes here are not correct. I actually have about 16K to start the hand. So I go ahead and make it $3,300. I anticipate Barry folding a good deal, and you can't hear it here, but he actually starts talking a little bit, and that should have been clue number 1 to me. He was mentioning that I had a flush draw, and he's just kind of talking a lot. And it seemed like if you watch some previous footage when he did that, he often had a weaker hand. He decides to make it $7,000, and now the action's on Justin. He and Justin are very, very deep here. So Justin's in a pretty interesting spot. He was also had to be concerned about me with having 13K behind, because if he just calls here and then I jam, Barry can then rejam or do whatever, and then he's kind of in a tough spot as well. If Justin puts me on a really strong range of sets and 2 pair, he's not doing very good against that range. So it's not a really great spot here for Justin, and I'm not sure what I would do if I were in his shoes. He ends up thinking for a really long time and folding, which kind of capped off a really rough 2 days for Justin, where he was in some tough spots and just seemed to make the wrong decision every time. Justin's a great player, and he took it all in stride, and he was a lot of fun to play with. I kind of felt for him after this hand. Another mistake I made here was once Barry made the raise, I kind of just was done with the hand and didn't really think through what Barry would be raising with here and what Justin would have that he'd be thinking so long with. And if I could go back in time, obviously it's easy to see when you see the cards. It's so easy to see it all play out like this. But if I could go back in time, I would definitely either not raise flop or figure out a way to continue with my hand against what Barry was doing, just kind of clicking buttons here. But I did not, and instead Barry got his revenge and owned me and Justin pretty hard.
And down goes ace 6 of clubs
Just take it. Just fucking take it.
Now we're showing, right?
as Savage folds the 8 and the third best hand, pocket sevens.
Just fucking take it.
Somehow wins this one.
God.
Owned. Was it the best hand?
No.
No.
This was the last relevant hand of the session. I ended up getting into the game for $22,000 and out for around $14,000. I lost about $8,000 on this session. Given we were playing 50-100 for most of the day and had some straddles in there, this is not that big of a loss. Coupled with my win for the night before, I ended up down $5,000 for the 2 days. The one interesting thing was I straddled a decent amount over these 2 days, and I went through all the coverage, and I don't think I won a single pot that I straddled, which is a little frustrating, obviously. Overall, I made some mistakes here and there, but it's important to recognize that you're going to make mistakes every single time you play poker. No matter how much poker you play, how good you are at poker, you're going to make mistakes. And it's important to just be able to go back and reevaluate your decision-making process and see what you can learn and what you can implement into future sessions that you play.
Nice hand, Barry.
No. Were you on a club draw?
No.
Really? He was on a club draw. Yeah, he put 3,600 in and just snap folded.
I played so many hands so terribly. That's the one I'm more embarrassed about right there. That's the one.
That's all for this series, guys. It was a blast playing on Poker After Dark. I appreciate all the support I got from you guys during play. Obviously, I wish it would have went a little bit better, but the experience was amazing. Big shout out to PokerGo. Big shout out to Brent Hanks and everybody who I played with on the show. It was a lot of fun. Thanks for watching as always, guys. I'll be back with some more videos soon from these meetup games, and I'll see you guys later. Please, if you like the videos, please like, subscribe, comment. I will respond to all your comments, and feel free to hit me up on Instagram, whatever. Also, check out me and Jody's podcast. It's called Raising the Nuts. It's on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, all the places that you can find podcasts. Till then, I'll see you guys again soon.
Say, oh.